Hey everybody, it's Briggsell here, and this video is about the Company of Heroes series. Now, let me just explain what that includes. That includes Company of Heroes, the first game, the two add-on packs, Opposing Fronts and Tales of Valor, plus on the online version of the game that came out a little bit later, and the Company of Heroes 2, which came out earlier this year, or it might have been last year actually, now I think about it, but whatever. So what this video is about is purely about how I think the game has developed and how I love the game or like the game in certain aspects, the comparisons between the first iteration of the game and the second iteration of the game, a little bit about modifications for the first game, Company of Heroes, which you'll see is the first set of footage that will be shown, and its future and possible futures. I'll also be explaining why I prefer one over the other. I'll explain about which one I actually prefer later on. But to begin with, I'll show you some of the Company of Heroes 1 or Company of Heroes footage. This footage has the mod installed onto it called the Blitzkrieg mod, which I think is the best mod around. There are others like Modern Combat and Eastern Front mod. Both are really good on their own right, but I really prefer the Blitzkrieg mod. If we could have the Blitzkrieg mod in with Eastern Front, it would be the best mod since ever for the game. Let's just say that. Anyway, let's get started with the footage. I just want to say this now, that the footage that you will see is only against the AI, because I don't particularly like playing against real people. So I tend to just play against the AI, and in the first Company of Heroes game you'll see that the AI don't perform very well, because with the mod the AI are broken kind of on certain maps like this one. I didn't know that when I recorded the footage until obviously I see the whole of the footage in tow. Anyway, so the first thing you're going to notice is that because of the mod, the game looks a little bit different. You'll see that there are more units, the units are a little bit smaller. The mod basically changes realism and adds a couple of bits and pieces here and there about the trees and the tech trees and all that sort of stuff. Other than that, the game looks just as good as it's ever looked. The graphic settings are set to probably medium because I like to play this game on decent frame rate. I mean, I could play it on high, but if I play with 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 players, then I find that it gets a bit difficult in terms of lag wise, so I kind of just keep it on a medium setting. It still looks good despite this. Now, let's begin with this first game. Now, I've always loved the graphic style of Company of Heroes. It's always had its own little flavour. It looks decent when you're close up like this in the cinematic mode, but it looks just as good when you zoom out, if not better. And the physics of the game, which I think are some of the best physics ever as an RTS series, is just fantastic. Now, this game type differs from Company of Heroes 2, which you'll see later on, in the sense that the capturing of the points, you actually have to press the button to capture the points, whereas with Company of Heroes 2, all you need to do is walk into the area. Now, I don't know if that's an improvement on the system, but I certainly kind of not too sure about whether that works for me or not. It kind of works based on proximity rather than actual clicking of the buttons. The resource system works a little differently as well from Company of Heroes 2. I'll explain that when the Company of Heroes 2 footage is shown. And also, the actual physics of the game have changed somewhat from this to Company of Heroes 2. Whereas things don't react the same way, obviously because of an upgraded engine and kind of more up-to-date technology when it comes to the scripting and all that sort of stuff. Essentially though, the game is almost a carbon copy, really, except updated. The only things that they've really changed is they've added that graphical kind of upgrade that was needed for any reboot of the series to continue. They've also changed the setting of the game in Company of Heroes 2, where it's on the eastern front. Now it's, this is actually on the western front, although there is a mod to add the Russian soldiers. What I love about this game is its very simple nature. You create units to fight other units. You do your best to pit your units against others that are weak compared to the units you've produced. Like, for instance, if you have an MG squad against an infantry squad, not like this is going to show in a minute, this is going to show that it's a terrible thing, but later on this actual footage you'll see that an MG squad against an open infantry squad will just absolutely murder them. But if you bring up some kind of light vehicle, like the M24 light armoured vehicle that you'll see later on, you'll notice that there's absolutely no chance for an MG squad or an infantry squad for that matter. It's all about having the bigger gun compared to the people that you're fighting against. That's what World War II was all about, really, having the bigger gun, as obviously history showed. With this game, with this Company of Heroes game, I'm just going to say this. I put a lot of time into playing this game. A lot of time actually playing against a computer and not really playing against any humans at all. We'd play occasionally with my friends against the computers. Sometimes I'd play on my own with computers against the computers. So my kind of feelings on this game are all based in the single player way, in the cooperative playing way, rather than any kind of multiplayer experience. Now, some of you may have a different version or different feeling when it comes to playing this game online against real people. You may feel that it's dictated by the actual people who play the game rather than the game itself and how the game works. Now, with this mod, this Blitzkrieg mod that you see in this footage, you'll notice that things look a little bit different. The units that you see are not all representative of the units you'd see in the vanilla game. You also notice that things look like they get killed a lot easier, and I think that is the case in certain aspects of the game. When you add this MG onto here, and the fact that the pioneers seem to be able to murder this infantry incredibly quickly, that's purely because they're out of cover. But in the old game, even with that out of cover, those infantry wouldn't have died so quickly compared to, this version of the mod. So there are a lot of differences in this game and the modifications associated with the game, which makes almost an entirely new experience, which is why I've played so much of the game. Now, people may be asking me, why am I talking about all this now, kind of in like retrospective? Well, I've played a lot of Company of Heroes. If I combine all the games that I've played of Company of Heroes and Company of Heroes 2, I've played 436 hours, mostly of this Company of Heroes game. I've only played 82 of the Company of Heroes 2, but I've played enough of it to know kind of how the game works and what I like about it and what I really don't like about it. But I'll explain that when that footage comes up. What I'll do now is I'll let you watch this footage and give yourself an idea of what this game's all about, give you the feel of the game without me blabbering over it about this stuff. And just a word of advice here is this is where the MG literally just mows the shit out of this Pioneer squad.
Grateful fatherland and the glorious defend the fatherland until death.
Perimeter. Our base is under attack.
Defend the fatherland until death.
Enemy is down to 100 points. They're in our base. They're hitting our base.
So, as you can see, I'm really badly losing this game. Although I'm winning on tickets, if I'm not careful I could lose this to a complete annihilation. Luckily I bring this Stug 3 out and we can go forward and pretty much win this. But the things that you've probably started to notice is that a lot of the vehicles and a lot of the weapons and the guns and the things have changed because of the modification. That is because of the communities. Now, I want to talk about the communities of this game and the genre as it is. I've always felt that the Company of Heroes kind of community has always had a really nice feel to it. I've never encountered any hostility towards wanting to play this game or wanting to change the way this game works. When I've read about all the mods and things that have come out, I've always seen positive feedback and positive kind of comments about how great these things are. There's very little negativity surrounding these games. I think Company of Heroes 2 did develop a little bit of negativity purely because it was a little bit different to Company of Heroes. It wasn't as what people were expecting from the game. But those who love this series got behind Company of Heroes 2, and I'll explain a bit more about what I mean by that later on. But with the modifications that could be created for Company of Heroes, came with it a lot of differences in opinion on what people wanted to see, and that led to so many diverse different modifications that I'm really happy with the way things have worked out for the Company of Heroes series. I was saddened to hear that obviously THQ, which was the creator of this game, obviously went into liquidation and they got bought out, and things didn't go particularly well. I'd love to see a little bit more adaptation from this game, because I think it had room for that adaptation. Maybe added the Eastern Front instead of giving Company of Heroes 2 that kind of Eastern Front feel. They could have made Company of Heroes 2 like Company of Heroes 1, in the sense that they would have brought it up to the, without excluding the Americans and the British and the Canadians and all the other people who fought in World War II. Instead of just focusing on the Russians and the Germans, I honestly think they could have, if they'd have this been the last add-on pack for Company of Heroes, essentially, and then when Company of Heroes 2, they could have used the engine that they were creating for Company of Heroes 2 and made it so it was a world war, not just a fight between some Germans and some Russians. Anyway, that's one of my only gripes with the way that the series has progressed. Anyway, let's move on to the footage from the Company of Heroes 2. Now, this footage is against easy enemy. People are going to say, oh, well, you suck. I do suck at this game. I don't pretend to actually play this game in any way, shape or form well, but I play this game because I love playing this game. So, Company of Heroes 2, what has changed, you ask? Well, the first thing you'll notice is the graphic style has changed quite a lot. They've changed certain aspects of the features. The bunkers here aren't made of concrete, they're made of sandbags and woods, which is more realistic in certain aspects. The actual kind of setup of the game itself, the HUD, or the heads-up display, all that sort of stuff, is quite similar to the old style. They made the radar or the map a little bit bigger. They've obviously changed position of certain things, but in general, most of the things have changed. But you'll notice that the proximity of these points has changed as well. It shows obviously that you don't need to click on the button. All you need to do is to go into the location and you can capture the point. It's all about proximity. You'll also notice that when I create units, they come from the side, from the off side, rather than from the building themselves. This is a very logical step for Company of Heroes 2 to have been made. It means, really, that the game has developed from things spawning out of nowhere to things actually coming in from off-site, which is probably what you would see in a kind of real battle. You'd see reinforcements coming in from off-site. They wouldn't just come out of nowhere. What I will say that has changed, though, is the fact that these buildings, there's a lot less upgradable aspects to these buildings. In the original game, you'd have your main HQ be able to unlock certain aspects. Say if you were German, you'd be able to unlock demolitions and wire cutters and all that sort of stuff. Whereas in this game, it doesn't seem to be anything like that at all. The configurations of the teams seems actually quite limited, and the thing that really disappoints me about Company of Heroes 2 is the commander system. Now, the commanders are technically the tech trees, or the skill trees what Company Heroes were, where you'd be able to select a certain route. Unfortunately for Company of Heroes 2, they decided to go with a completely different route, and that is that you would select a certain commander from a list of commanders that you have or have bought, which I'll come on to again later on because I'm not particularly happy about that. And they have got certain abilities that once you get to a certain skill point level, you will unlock. Like for instance, the first point of this commander I've chosen is the field artillery officers, which I don't actually use in this video, but nonetheless they are unlocked automatically. You don't choose to unlock these things. They are, when you get up to 10 points, pretty much everything's been unlocked. Whereas in Company of Heroes, you get to choose what you want to unlock at a certain time, so you can change the way you play. This is a really, really kind of narrowing of the customization that you can have in this game. It's a reason why I haven't played this game for 200 and 300 hours. It's a game that if it was Company of Heroes 1, I would have played that much amount of time, even though it's only been out for less than a year. That customization, that modification that could be used later on in time, is the only reason why I honestly think that this game lacks something compared to Company of Heroes. Now don't get me wrong, a lot of this game is good. A lot of it is good. The way they do certain things is really good. The commander system, for me, has soured this game for me, which is a shame, because all I wanted from this game is something that I could play for hours upon hours and feel better about playing, because it was a little bit upgraded and the graphics were a little bit better and in general things improved. Unfortunately, what I found was a kind of half unbalanced game with a little bit awkward kind of control systems, and things just didn't feel the way that I wanted them to feel. Now that's not through any fault of the publisher or the people who made the game. They wanted to create their own version or their own kind of vision of what this game should be about. That's absolutely fair enough. My problem is that they've done so by doing some of the aspects of the game creation world which I really despise, and that is DLC. I despise DLC in all its forms, because what you're really doing is you're buying little bits of the game that in my eyes should be in the game anyway, regardless of paying for it. In all honesty, if you, back in say 2002, 2003, you released a game, right? You released a game, but you told people that in order to play the whole of the game in its entirety, in its 100% nature, you'd have to then purchase little bits of DLC to make the game up to 100%. Little bits of the game that should be there anyway, that were built probably months and months ago, or weeks ago, or whenever, before the game released, except that they did it on the purpose of making that little bit extra money. That's why I don't trust game companies as much as I used to, because they just seem to try to get as much money out of these games as possible. And I can understand why they do it, because the business is very fraught with danger. Piracy is one of these things. But I think that if you build a good game, the worst thing you can honestly do with that game is to then produce this DLC stuff that should be in the game to begin with and cheapen the game itself. And I don't mean cheapen in the terms of money. I'm in terms of its kind of... Oh, it's very difficult to explain. I don't like that feeling of not getting a full game product without having to pay for all the little bit of extras that should be there already. Now, if the DLC comes 3 months later and it's added new stuff to the game, fair enough. That is absolutely fine. What I deem them things as are add-on packs or expansion packs, because it expands the game. DLC is a cheap term to describe something that should already be there that you have to then pay for. It's pathetic, and I really despise any one company who does it that way. Regardless of that, this game shows incredible merit, and if there was any way that you could create mods for this game could go easily into my top 10 of all time games, like the Company of Heroes game is. If it could have the modifications, if it didn't have those shitty little DLCs or the shitty little commander system, the tier system, this game would be amazing, and I'd love it for what it is. But for what it is now, I cannot love this game. I cannot love it. I'll certainly like it, and I'll certainly play a lot of it, but I'm not going to replay this game like I have done Company of Heroes. At this moment in time, I am still playing Company of Heroes over this game. Now, most people will say to me, but why are you doing that? You've got this new one's better, and all this sort of stuff. I don't think it's better. I honestly can't think it's better, because with the modifications for Company of Heroes, you get that little bit of an extra little twist, that little customization that I wanted to see in Company of Heroes 2, which I didn't. Anyway, with that said, I think that really gives an impression of what I feel of the comparison between the two. I don't think that this game is the best game of the series. I think that Company of Heroes 2 is a downgraded version of Company of Heroes, or what this Company of Heroes should have been. Now, what I'll do here, folks, is I'll let you watch the rest of the footage in peace. It's going to be quite an easy victory, as it would seem, because I'm playing against easy AI. And don't judge me for what I'm trying to say. This is my opinion. I don't mean to come off a bit as a dick or negative towards the game itself, but that's just the way it is. As for the community here in Company of Heroes 2 is just as good as the community from Company Heroes 1 or Company Heroes first game. There are always going to be dicks in the community, but that's just the way that the world works. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the video, and please, if you have any comments about what I've said or what I've done, what I've shown you, let me know in the comments below. Peace out.